Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a squeaky ladder, a loaf of bread that counts as a proposal, and a crowd of neighbors pretending not to listen through the walls. Intimacy here isn't candlelit. It's clumsy, noisy, and supervised by livestock, with better judgment than the people involved. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm, and take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling, and drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You arrive just after sunrise, when the village is still yawning and most of the livestock look hungover. A rooster attempts a half-hearted crow, thinks better of it, and waddles behind a trough. The mist curls between the cottages like it's hiding something, which, to be fair, it probably is. The place smells of wood smoke, wet wool, and suppressed curiosity. You nod to an old man with a bucket. He nods back, then immediately trips over his own goat. No one helps him. Not out of cruelty, but because dignity is scarce, and no one wants to share. Everything in this village leans slightly to the left. Buildings, fences, moral compasses. Even the church seems unsure of its alignment, slouching under the weight of too many confessions and not enough clarity. A sign near the well reads, "Do not," though whatever was meant to follow has been smudged into philosophical ambiguity. The baker's boy is already out, flour on his chin, whistling a tune that may or may not be obscene, depending on which grandmother you ask. You pass a bench near the market square, where 3 elderly women sit, swaddled in shawls and vague disapproval. They watch you with the intensity of hawks who once lost a chicken and never quite recovered. One of them mutters something about breeches too short for decency, and the others nod in agreement without ever clarifying what she meant. You look down. Your breeches are fine, probably. The goat from earlier walks by, chewing what might have once been a sermon. It doesn't take long to realize that everyone here has children, yet no one remembers how they got them. They appear, as if summoned by ritual or strong wind, usually named after saints or root vegetables. The local priest gives vague sermons about earthly closeness and joining spirits under moonlight. But the only thing people join under moonlight is the communal ale barrel, and even that's supervised. You meet a girl named Anwin who talks like she's hiding a secret in every sentence. She offers you a basket of berries and a smile that suggests either friendliness or a challenge to duel. You ask if she lives nearby. She says, just past the field where the cabbages cry. You decide not to follow up. At the tavern, no one says the word. Not love, not lust, not even cuddle. They refer to it as the business, the yonder shuffle, or, if they've had too much mead, the seasonal tilting. A man with one eyebrow and a suspiciously soft voice leans over to whisper about the time he found a pair of stockings under his cart and had to burn the whole thing out of respect. You don't know what that means. He doesn't either. There are rules, unspoken but heavily enforced. You may hold hands only during church, funerals, or when wrestling for the last potato. If someone winks at you, they might be flirting, or they might have dust in their eye from 3 harvests ago. If someone brings you a pie, it could mean affection, or it could mean you're being blamed for an unwanted pregnancy, and this is a warning shot. Behind the blacksmith's hut, there's a patch of grass referred to only as the meadow. No one will admit what happens there, but it's always mysteriously trampled. And someone once claimed to have seen a man enter alone and leave with a limp and a daisy in his hair. The blacksmith denies everything. So does the daisy. Children are told stories to keep them pure. That if they ask too many questions about where babies come from, the cows will stop producing milk and the bees will unionize. A boy once carved a heart into a tree and was made to scrub chamber pots for a fortnight, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because people thought he might soon. Romance is not forbidden. It's just considered tacky. Your neighbor, a woman named Thistle, has 3 sons, 2 daughters, and no discernible husband. When asked, she gestures vaguely toward the hills and says, "The wind brings many things." No one presses further. The wind, after all, has been blamed for worse, like the fire of 19. And Gertie's mustache. Late at night, if you listen closely, you can hear soft shuffling from the haylofts, the occasional giggle, a cow sighing dramatically. But come morning, no one mentions it. If you say anything, they pretend they were dreaming. Even the rooster looks the other way. One morning, you find a small wooden charm on your doorstep, shaped like a turnip, with a red ribbon tied in a suspiciously hopeful bow. You ask your neighbor what it means. She squints at it, squints at you, and says, "You'll want to check the west field after sunset, but don't wear your nice shoes." You don't have nice shoes. The blacksmith's daughter is married off in a quiet ceremony that involves bread, garlic, and several uncomfortable silences. During the vows, no one says, "Till death do us part," but rather, "Until such time as the barley withers and the cow stops chewing." She smiles. Her new husband sneezes. It feels oddly appropriate. Evenings are the most dangerous. That's when the conversations turn slow and lingering, when someone might casually ask if you enjoy stargazing or if your cottage is well insulated. These are not innocent questions. These are invitations dressed in wool and denial. You learn to reply with noncommittal grunts and strategically timed yawns. There's no privacy. Not really. Every wall is thin. Every bed shared. Every floorboard betrays its step. So people learn to be quiet or fast or unusually convincing with excuses involving ghosts, wind, or aggressive squirrels. No one is fooled. Everyone pretends to be. By your 3rd week, you've developed a talent for understanding what isn't said. A raised eyebrow means interest. A basket of bread means availability. A goat tied near your doorstep means someone is declaring an intention. You tie the goat to someone else's post. You fit in now, or at least, you blend. You nod solemnly when someone mentions the burden of the flesh. You say things like, "Well, it's the season for longing," and pretend you know what that means. You avoid the meadow. You accept the pie. You ignore the giggles behind the tavern. You never speak the word. But every now and then, you catch someone's eye across the well, or feel a warm elbow brush yours a little too intentionally, and something in the air shifts, just slightly. The village doesn't talk about it, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. It just means they've found other ways. You're stirring a pot of something vaguely edible when he appears at the doorway, cradling a turnip like it's a newborn or a threat. His boots are muddy, one of them untied, and he's managed to tuck in only half of his shirt, which is impressive, considering it's mostly holes. His hair looks like it lost a bet with the wind. You don't say anything at first. Neither does he. Instead, he holds the turnip a little higher, as if to clarify that yes, this is the main event. The turnip is, by all accounts, an average specimen. Lumpy, damp, possibly judging you. You wonder if you're supposed to say something. Thank you? Congratulations? I do? You settle for, is it for me? He nods with the solemnity of a man proposing war, then immediately sneezes into his elbow. Romance, in this village, is not so much a flower as it is a tuber. Ugly, practical, and likely to have been dug up in a panic 15 minutes before arrival. You take the turnip. He looks relieved, like he was worried you might hurl it back at him or ask what happened to flowers. No one here bothers with flowers. Flowers are for funerals or bees, and neither are ideal metaphors for starting something personal. You stand awkwardly for a moment, turning the turnip in your hands like it might reveal secrets. He clears his throat, wipes his nose on his sleeve, and mutters, "It's a good one. Didn't even have worms in it." You nod. You try to look impressed. You resist the urge to ask if that's what happened with the last one. In this village, no one teaches you how courtship works. You just absorb it. Like mildew, you watch the older couples dance around each other with the intimacy of people who have shared a bed, a child, and a really bad winter. No one talks about feelings, but if someone saves you the last chunk of bread, that's practically a proposal. If they offer you their only dry sock, it's already too late. You're emotionally Wednesday. You and the turnip giver walk toward the well together, which is not as romantic as it sounds. The path is muddy, and a chicken is following you with sinister intent. He tries to ask how your mother is, but it comes out as, "Is your mom still alive?" Followed by a wince and a noise that might be regret or indigestion. You say yes. "Thank you." He says good, then adds, "She makes strong soup." You're not sure if it's a compliment or a warning. When you reach the well, the usual trio of shawled women are already perched nearby, bundled up like gossiping onions. They eye your companion. They eye the turnip. One of them snorts and mutters something about early harvest, and the other two laugh into their shawls. He turns pink. You pretend not to hear. The well is where most courtships begin, end, or unravel entirely. It's neutral ground, sacred terrain. You could lose a bucket, a reputation, or your entire sense of self-worth here. You lower the rope together, hands brushing, not quite meeting. He asks if you like stew. You say sometimes. He says he's very good at chopping. You believe him. He looks like he's been chopping something, possibly aggressively, for most of his life. By the time the bucket comes up, he's somehow told you about his 3 siblings, 1 goat, and a recurring dream where a fish judges him silently. You don't know what this means, but you nod like you do. The water sloshes. The turnip sweats. He asks if you'd like to walk to the barley field tomorrow. This is serious. This is practically a vow. The barley field is where people go to talk, which is code for rolling around and pretending it's spontaneous. You say maybe. You say depends on the weather. He grins like someone who's just been handed the good ladle. The shawl women cackle. The chicken pecks your ankle. You ignore both. Later, back at your cottage, you set the turnip on the table like an artifact. Your mother sees it and raises an eyebrow. "Him?" she asks. You shrug. She shrugs back. "Could be worse," she says. "Could have brought parsnips." You both shudder. There are no letters, no poetry, no midnight sonnets, just vegetables and vague suggestions. Once, a boy carved a heart into a log. It was misinterpreted as a carp, and he was forced to marry someone's cousin. The lesson stuck. Be subtle, be awkward, be holding produce. That night, you dream of barley and fish. You wake up unsure if this means anything or if your brain is simply confused by all the emotional starch. You go outside, watch the stars, and wonder if this is it. If this is how it starts. Not with fireworks or violins, but with root vegetables and a boy who thinks sneezing into his sleeve is charming. Somewhere, not far off, someone is arguing with a cow. Someone else is giggling in a haystack. The world is muddled and itchy and strange, but the turnip is still on your table, and somehow, that feels like something. It starts with a smile, which is already suspicious. No one in the village smiles without an ulterior motive, especially not after sunset. He leans on the doorframe of the smokehouse with the casual confidence of someone who's recently learned how elbows work, and says, "Reckon you fancy a sit then?" You hesitate. He gestures toward the barn with the same gravity another man might use to indicate a shrine. You say sure, like this isn't the exact moment your life begins to veer off a narrow, dusty path and into something warmer, dumber, and probably full of straw. The barn smells like hay, old wood, and decisions. There's a soft rustling from above, where something, rat, ghost, romantic witness, scurries into the shadows. He leads you in like he's hosting a banquet. Despite the fact that the only available seating is a wooden bucket, a broken yoke, or the floor itself, you choose the hay because it's softer than wood and only slightly more judgmental. He sits beside you with the gracelessness of someone trying very hard to seem like they're not trying at all. His knee bumps yours, and neither of you mention it. You both pretend to be intensely interested in a patch of light on the opposite wall, as if it holds answers to questions you haven't worked up the courage to ask. The silence stretches, loose and frayed at the edges. He clears his throat in a way that suggests he's about to say something important, and then doesn't. You glance sideways. He's chewing a piece of straw like it owes him money. You can hear the faint sound of someone hammering down the road, the occasional grunt of a pig adjusting its life choices, and beneath it all, the slow creak of the barn settling around your awkwardness. "I like your walking," he says finally, as if complimenting your feet is both flattering and not slightly deranged. You thank him. You think, it's hard to respond when you're unsure whether you've just been courted or accused of suspicious locomotion. The goat arrives around then, stepping out from behind a bale of hay like it's been sent by fate or someone's nosy grandmother. It stares at you with horizontal pupils and what you can only describe as deep biblical judgment. You shuffle a little further into the straw. So does he. There's not much room between you now. Just enough for plausible deniability and a shared sense of terror. You don't know who moves first. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's him. Maybe the goat exhaled in a suggestive manner. All you know is that suddenly there's a hand resting lightly on yours, and your hearts are both trying to exit your bodies through the same door. His hand is rough, warm, unsure. Yours is trembling in a way that could be nerves, excitement, or the beginnings of a hay allergy. He leans closer, and you wonder if you're about to be kissed or interrogated. His breath smells like cider and something vaguely herbal. You've never been this close to another person without some sort of chore being involved. He tilts his head. You tilt yours. You both miss. You try again. It lands. It's not smooth. It's not poetic. It's slightly damp and you knock noses and at one point your teeth clack. But it's real. It's happening. And the world doesn't end. The goat snorts. You both pull back like children caught by a teacher, blinking in the dusty light. You laugh. He laughs. It's a strange, bubbling sound, like water finally finding the crack in a dam. You feel something loosen in your chest that's been knotted for what feels like your whole life. Then, boldly, he reaches behind you and tosses some hay onto the floor, like it's an invitation to luxury. You both lie back, because apparently this is what happens now, and suddenly there's straw in your shirt, and your elbow is pressing into something sharp, and you've never felt less composed or more alive. He whispers something that might be sweet or might be nonsense. You don't care. Your hands find each other again. You fumble. You guess. You hope. Your bodies are learning a dance that neither of you know the steps to. There's no music, no script, just breath and warmth and the clumsy, sacred mess of it. And it is messy. There's a point where you lose your balance and knock into a rake, which topples over with the kind of crash that makes you both freeze, wide-eyed, waiting for the world to storm in and tell you to stop. But nothing happens. Just the steady creak of the barn, the rustle of straw, the faint, disapproving grunt of a pig outside who's clearly heard worse. After, you lie beside each other, chests heaving, hearts stammering, staring up at the rafters like they might contain the meaning of all this. Your legs are tangled. Your hair is full of hay. He reaches over and picks a bit from your eyebrow with surprising gentleness. Neither of you speaks for a while. When you finally do, it's to say something meaningless. "Reckon it'll rain tomorrow," you mutter. He nods solemnly, as if this is the most profound thing anyone's ever said. You both know you'll be picking straw out of your clothes for days, possibly weeks. There's probably some in your soul now. Eventually, you sit up. He offers you a hand. You take it. It's rough and warm and steady. The barn door creaks open behind you as a breeze rolls in, kicking up dust and regret and something softer. The goat is gone, probably to spread rumors. You walk out into the fading light together, the sun sinking low behind the hills, casting the whole village in a warm, knowing hush. No one asks where you've been. No one needs to. The straw in your hair says enough. You never got the talk. No one sat you down, folded their hands, and told you about anatomy, intention, or even basic etiquette. What you got instead was barn acoustics, whispers through the slats, rhythmic thumping that could have been machinery but never was. The occasional yelp that taught you things don't always go according to plan. You learned early that curiosity is punished not with answers, but with mumbled prayers and a stern glance toward the heavens, as if God himself was growing tired of the whole business. Your first real lesson came from the miller's daughter, or more accurately, from the miller's daughter, and a boy you didn't recognize, somewhere behind the oat sacks. You'd gone in looking for a cat. What you found instead was a crash, a giggle, and the unmistakable sound of someone apologizing mid-movement. You backed out slowly, as if your body had become a ghost, trying not to breathe in case it counted as involvement. The cat was never seen again, possibly traumatized, possibly wiser than you. You mention what you heard to your mother once, half joking, half hoping she might explain something. She doesn't flinch. She just snaps the neck off a chicken with the kind of precision that suggests she's done this before and says, "When the time comes, you'll know what to do," which is both comforting and deeply unhelpful, like being told you'll figure out swimming after you're thrown into the sea in full armor. So instead, you learn the village curriculum. It's not linear, it's not even intentional. You piece it together from the nightly symphony of creaks, gasps, groans, and urgent grunts that echo across the fields. The walls of this town are thin, and the people in it are thick with need, boredom, and the understanding that privacy is a luxury best left to the wealthy or the dead. One evening, you're walking past the granary when you hear what can only be described as a startled squeak, followed by a man whispering, "There, there, no, not there, yes," then silence, and then a sheep bleating with such impeccable timing that you wonder if it's learned to mock human failure. You duck your head, keep walking, and try to store away the information like it might help you someday. So far, your notes read: enthusiasm is common, precision is not, and laughter is either a good sign or a very bad one. There's a game the children play, a cruel little rhyme about the baker and the smith's wife. It ends in a verse that involves flour on her back and anvil time. You don't understand all of it, but you understand enough to know it's not about baking or metalwork. The older kids smirk when they say it. The adults pretend they've gone deaf. You start paying more attention to what's left unsaid, and what's said too often. You begin to notice which couples never smile at each other, and which neighbors always return borrowed tools a week late, and smelling suspiciously of sweat and herbs. At night, the village becomes a classroom. The wooden beams of the cottages creak like nervous knees. Beds thump, springs protest, and someone, somewhere, always lets out a breathy, "Oh Lord," that probably isn't about religion. You lie in your own bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how anything that sounds so urgent could also involve so much coughing. The pigs next door are excellent listeners. You once overheard a boy swearing he saw the shepherdess in nothing but socks. You didn't believe him until you passed her the next day, and she winked at you while eating a plum too slowly to be innocent. You avoided fruit for a week. Your understanding grows like mold, quietly, in the corners, fed by neglect and humidity. You learn that haylofts are multi-purpose, that bruises on elbows don't always come from chores, that someone shouting faster might not be talking to a horse, and yet, despite all the sounds and all the hints and all the whispered jokes, you're still not entirely sure what goes where, or for how long, or if anyone actually enjoys it, or if it's just a very elaborate social obligation wrapped in grunting and regret. There's an incident with the tailor's apprentice and the candlemaker's son. They disappear behind the woodshed one afternoon and emerge much later, red-faced and walking like their knees forgot how to exist. The village pretends not to notice, but the well water suddenly tastes like judgment. You pass them later, heads close together, eyes full of secrets and smoke. You realize then that maybe it's not always about instruction. Maybe it's about discovery, possibly also experimentation, possibly with poor results. You ask the priest once, pretending to be curious about marriage. He tells you love is a spiritual bond, sex is for procreation, and impure thoughts are the devil's stew pot. His face goes red. He adjusts his robes 3 times. You leave knowing less than when you started, and deeply suspicious of stew pots. Eventually, you come to accept that no one's going to explain it to you properly, that the village has chosen mystery over clarity, sound over speech, vague metaphors over useful diagrams. Your education comes in glances, giggles, stains on borrowed cloaks, and the occasional misplaced undergarment flapping on a line like a warning flag. But then, one night, you hear a different sound. Not the usual frantic slaps and wheezes, but something slower, softer, a rhythm more like breathing than effort. You press your ear to the wall, expecting the usual chaos, and instead find something that feels kind. You can't see anything, but you can feel it in the way the boards hum gently, like a lullaby no one ever wrote down. There's a pause, a sigh, and then laughter. Real laughter. Not mocking or nervous, but the kind that says, "That was enough. That was good." And just like that, something clicks. You may not know everything yet. You may still flinch when a rooster crows at the wrong moment, or when someone offers you a turnip with too much eye contact. But in that moment, with your ear to the wall and your heart doing odd things in your chest, you finally understand one important thing. It's not always about how long it lasts. Sometimes it's about how real it feels. You don't plan it. No one does. That would imply intention, preparation, or even the faintest glimmer of useful advice, and you have exactly none of those things. What you have instead is a stomach full of nerves, a vague idea of what goes where based on barn noises and shadow puppetry, and someone beside you who looks equally terrified, which, you suppose, is the closest thing to compatibility available in your current tax bracket. It begins somewhere between the end of chores and the beginning of supper, in that strange hour where the world smells like damp wool and livestock, and everyone pretends they don't notice who's sneaking off with whom. You find yourselves in a storage hut with a single candle, half a sack of barley, and the kind of ambiance only rotting turnips can provide. There's hay, because of course there is. It cradles your limbs like judgment wrapped in splinters. They touch your arm first, not romantically, not confidently, more like someone testing bread dough to see if it's risen enough. You nod like you've done this before. They nod like they haven't, which is honest and oddly endearing. Then there's a moment, a brief, hovering pause, where neither of you moves, as if the gods might descend and shout, "Actually, no. Terrible idea. Go churn some butter instead." But the gods are mercifully distracted, probably by a war or a plague or someone inventing the loot, so nothing stops you, except your own awkward limbs. There's fumbling, there's apologizing. Someone elbows a bucket, and it makes a noise that can only be described as haunted pig. You both freeze, then laugh too loudly. You've passed the first test. Mutual humiliation. Clothes become the enemy. They're too tight, too knotted, too woolen to offer anything but resistance. There's a moment when you think about asking for help with your shirt ties but decide you'd rather die in them. Eventually, you both end up in various stages of undress that would confuse a tailor but might qualify as ready in the eyes of your ancestors, who did this sort of thing in caves and never complained once, probably because they died at 30. The actual act is less poetry and more math exam. There's pressure and hesitation, and at least one moment where you both stop to recalibrate. It's intense in the way that breaking a fence post with your bare hands might be intense, loud, messy, and immediately regretted. But it's also oddly quiet. Time sort of stutters. You forget who's breathing louder. You lose track of your own hands. Everything smells like dust and warm skin and a faint hint of panic. Then, quite suddenly, it's over. You don't know if you did it right. You're not even sure what right means. There's no applause, no mystical transformation. Just the two of you, half naked and half aware of how bizarre your hair looks, staring at the ceiling like it might file a complaint. You both lie there for a while, afraid to speak in case you break whatever strange spell has settled over the room. Then, without a word, they reach over, grab a handful of oatcakes from a basket, and hand you one like a peace offering. You eat it slowly. It tastes dry and judgmental. You chew it like it's your last meal and you've just committed a crime no one will name. Afterward, you return to the village like warriors returning from a battle no one asked them to fight. No one looks at you differently. No one asks questions, not even your closest friends. There is no ceremony, no whispered congratulations. Just the same chores waiting, the same chickens to shoe, the same bucket of water to carry back from the well. You half expect someone to pull you aside, to offer a nod or a knowing look, but the village moves on like nothing has changed. Maybe nothing has. Maybe this is just how it goes. A private moment swallowed whole by the endlessly hungry mouth of daily survival. At one point, an older woman offers you a piece of cheese and says, "Sleep well tonight," in a tone that might mean everything or nothing. You smile politely. You still have hay in your hair. That night, lying in your own bed, you stare at the ceiling again. Not the one from earlier, a less judgmental one. You replay everything in your mind, but it plays like a puppet show performed by drunk geese. Nothing fits where it should. No moment feels quite like the stories whispered by candlelight. But still, there's something there. A flicker, a warmth, a realization that you've crossed a threshold you didn't know existed. You expect to feel different. You expect to feel older, wiser, perhaps glowing with some ancient inner light. Instead, you mostly feel itchy and a little hungry. You eat another oatcake. This one's better. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. You curl up beneath your blanket, legs still sore in strange places, and think about all the things no one said. You think about how no one warned you that it might be quick, confusing, or that sometimes someone might sneeze halfway through and ruin the rhythm entirely. No one tells you that your first time might involve barn spiders and hay rashes and laughter so nervous it could power a windmill. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the first time isn't supposed to be perfect or profound. Maybe it's supposed to be exactly what it was. Two people trying something new and terrifying and impossibly human in a world where nothing else makes sense. You fall asleep with straw in your socks, oatcake crumbs on your chest, and a faint smile you'll never explain. No one talks about the first time, but maybe, someday, you will. It starts with a squeak, not a dramatic one, just the casual, everyday squeak of leather shifting where it shouldn't. But in this village, even a mildly provocative squeak is a declaration of war. You're standing by the well when it happens, bucket in hand, perfectly positioned to witness what future generations will refer to with entirely too much drama as the incident of the belt buckle. The miller's apprentice, a boy with more ambition than good sense and a chin still figuring out its final shape, reaches across the flour sacks to adjust his belt. Or that's what he claims. Unfortunately, the belt sits precariously close to the bodice of May, the blacksmith's niece, who happens to be leaning forward at the exact moment his hand makes contact with something. It could have been innocent. It could have been a poorly timed attempt at fashion. It could have been the belt's fault entirely, as it's never fit quite right and has a long history of betraying him at social gatherings. But this is a village where one time a wink led to a cow being renamed Whore, so context is a luxury few can afford. May doesn't say anything. She just straightens up, blinks exactly once, and walks away with the kind of posture that suggests the earth itself should apologize. The apprentice, now visibly sweating, fumbles with his buckle like it might suddenly explode or reveal a hidden prophecy. A few people around the courtyard pretend they didn't see what they absolutely saw. A few others do the opposite, and immediately begin drafting full-length oral sagas about it. By dusk, the entire town knows. By nightfall, there are at least 4 versions of the story. 1 includes nudity, 2 include fainting, and 1 involves a goat who wasn't even in the vicinity but is apparently notorious enough to be inserted for flavor. You sit at supper listening to your aunt casually mention that the apprentice fondled her front bits, which is anatomically vague and alarmingly aggressive for someone who's never discussed human anatomy in her life. She stirs the stew with the same intensity she applies to gossip, and the two are often indistinguishable. The next day, the miller's wife is seen whispering furiously behind the bread stall. The blacksmith hammers unusually loud. May is nowhere to be found, which only makes the rumors grow teeth. You overhear someone say she's been sent to the convent to cool down, which feels less like a punishment and more like a communal sigh of relief. The apprentice tries to defend himself, of course. He goes around mumbling phrases like misunderstood positioning and belt malfunction, which only makes things worse because now people imagine scenarios far more interesting than reality could possibly provide. Someone starts calling him Sir Bucklehands, which sticks with alarming speed. By week's end, even the children have taken up the chant, turning it into a skipping rhyme that deeply confuses visiting merchants. You start to realize how fragile a reputation is here. It's not built on truth or even behavior, but proximity. A glance, a gesture, a touch that may or may not have happened. These are the bricks from which legacies are accidentally constructed and violently demolished. You think about how many hands brush against one another in the bakery line, how many sleeves catch on sleeves at market, and how any of it could be misread by the right pair of eyes fueled by the right amount of boredom. It's terrifying, and also a little thrilling. No one ever confirms what happened. May eventually returns, chin up, eyes steeled into something unbreakable. She wears a new bodice, one with a neckline that could kill a man at 20 paces. She doesn't speak of the incident. When someone asks her how the convent was, she simply replies, "Quiet," in a tone that could sharpen knives. The apprentice keeps his head down. Literally. You haven't seen his face in a week. He delivers flour like he's on the run from the law. His belt is now replaced by a rope, which feels both symbolic and practical. The village collectively decides not to forgive him, but also not to forget him, which is worse. You start to understand why people speak in riddles here, why no one ever says what they mean, why "would you like to share a pear" is often followed by pregnancy, why the truth is bent into curves that allow plausible deniability and just enough poetic flair to entertain. It's not about fact, it's about performance. And this is theater. The scandal has a half-life. It burns hot for 3 days, simmers for 7 more, and by the second market day, it's been replaced with fresher material. Namely, a married shepherd who's been seen buying lavender soap for himself. But the apprentice never quite recovers. You notice how people start greeting him 2 steps further away, how the girls who once giggled at his flour-dusted hair now cross the road entirely, and how the goat from the false version of the story gives him a wide berth, as if it knows its own legend and wants no part of it. You wonder if he regrets anything. You wonder if May does. Mostly, you wonder how much of this is real and how much is story, stretched and rewoven until even those involved can't remember the truth. That night, you lie in bed replaying it all. The buckle, the look, the way a single misstep becomes a bonfire in a village made of dry kindling and long winters. You think about your own hands, your own proximity, and how, in a place like this, even a glance can echo forever. The hut is smaller than you expect, and somehow larger on the inside, though not in any magical way. Just the sheer volume of dried plants and mysterious bundles hanging from the beams makes it feel like you've stepped into a well-seasoned closet. The air is thick with smoke, and the quiet suspicion that something in here is either curing or fermenting, possibly both. The local herb woman, known only as Grella, no surname, no title, just Grella, like a force of nature, sits by the fire, stirring a pot that bubbles menacingly. She doesn't look up when you enter. She doesn't need to. You've never actually spoken to her before. She exists on the outskirts of town, both geographically and emotionally, known for her ability to fix coughs, hex livestock, and make the priest stutter just by walking past him. Some say she's a witch. Others say she's a widow who got tired of conversation. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between and held together with twine. You shift your weight on the dirt floor, waiting to be acknowledged, but Grella just grunts and points to a stool that looks like it lost a fight with a boar. You sit. It creaks ominously. The entire room smells like wet bark and consequences. Without asking, she ladles a thick liquid into a chipped mug and hands it to you. It's a muted green color, the exact shade of envy mixed with moss, and it steams like it has opinions. You hold it with both hands, partly for warmth, partly in case it tries to escape. It smells like regret, rosemary, and something faintly metallic, like someone boiled a horseshoe for flavor. You say, "Is this the potion?" Because no one has taught you the official vocabulary. And she nods once, sharply, as if to say, "Yes, and don't ask stupid questions in my house. You've heard about this tea." Whispers passed between women who look over their shoulders before speaking. Sometimes it's called moonbane. Sometimes it's just called the thing for when you need, you know. They never say more than that, but everyone knows what it means. The idea is that if you drink it quickly enough, after certain kinds of events, it might stop certain kinds of consequences from growing inside you and eventually demanding shoes. You don't know how it works. No one does. That's the unspoken rule. Don't ask, don't analyze, just drink and pray. You take a sip. It's worse than expected. It tastes like someone punished a salad, like boiled pennies and forest floor. You try not to grimace, but Grella sees it anyway and lets out a dry chuckle that could desiccate fruit. She adds a sprig of something from a jar labeled simply, and the tea instantly develops a new note. Bitterness layered with vague hope. You try again. It still tastes like sin management. You think of the moment that brought you here, which feels both distant and uncomfortably fresh. The sweat, the whispers, the hay that definitely contributed more than it should have. You didn't plan for anything. Planning implies forethought, and forethought was drowned in hormones and the way someone said your name like it was a secret. Now you're here, drinking greenish soup with magic aspirations, hoping your body listens to a tea made by a woman who once threatened a tax collector with a chicken bone. Grella doesn't offer comfort. She offers root vegetables and occasionally a story about someone who didn't listen to her and now walks with a limp and 3 children. You try to ask a question, something about how effective this really is, but she just raises a brow and says, "It helps, most times." Then she squints at you like you're the least interesting puzzle she's solved today and adds, "But don't let it happen again. You're not a goose." You're not entirely sure what that means, but you nod as if you do. You finish the mug. She gives you a second, because apparently the dosage is until you question your choices. This one has something floating in it that might be a twig or might be the toe of a newt. You drink it anyway. By now, you've made peace with whatever internal damage this might cause. You suspect the alternative would cause more. On your way out, she hands you a pouch of dried leaves and mumbles something that might be a blessing or a threat. You say thank you, because manners still apply even when you're possibly ingesting a potion with a 50-50 track record. Outside, the air feels clearer, colder. You breathe deeply, trying to rid your tongue of the lingering taste of boiled uncertainty. No one sees you leave. That's how this works. You came at dusk for a reason. Everyone knows about the tea, but no one admits it. It's like the village itself has agreed that if you don't speak the name of a thing, it becomes less real, more manageable, like grief, or farts, or the local tax law. You walk home slowly, stomach bubbling with what you hope is effectiveness and not gastrointestinal betrayal. You pass the same people who would clutch their pearls if you so much as mentioned Grella by name. You wonder how many of them have made the same walk, how many faces have worn the same quiet panic, the same fragile relief, the same internal chant of please work, please work, please work. Back home, you lie down on your straw mattress, curled slightly, as if guarding your midsection with your spine. You close your eyes and try not to think of outcomes. You try not to think of anything at all. The taste still lingers, like memory and misfortune. You feel something shift inside, not pain, not peace, just motion, like your body deciding its own verdict. There's no ceremony, no sign, just time, waiting, and the knowledge that the village will never ask how it went. They'll look at your belly in the coming months, searching for hints, and if nothing changes, they'll pretend it never happened. They'll talk about the weather, the harvest, the tax, but never the tea, never Grella, never the moment when you realize that responsibility sometimes tastes like forest sludge, and hope is brewed in secret, sipped in silence, and swallowed whole. The first thing you notice is the noise. It's not screaming exactly, though there's some of that, but a kind of ongoing, low-level chaos, like a tavern brawl being acted out entirely by people under 3 feet tall. There are squeals, sniffles, small limbs flailing with the power of uncooked dough, and somewhere in the mix, a lullaby being sung off-key by someone who gave up an hour ago. You stand by the doorframe of the family's one-room cottage, holding a loaf of barley bread and a deeply confused sense of math. Because you've counted, there are 7 of them. In the bed, 1 bed, possibly once a bed, now more of a hay-stuffed democratic experiment in shared body heat. The parents are somewhere in the middle, faces slack with exhaustion and resignation, like they've accepted the concept of sleep as theoretical. Around them, 5 children, ranging in age from definitely still teething to old enough to point out your flaws, crawl and roll and jab each other with the kind of casual malice only siblings can achieve. And you realize, again, as you've realized before, and will continue to realize for the rest of your time in this village, that privacy isn't a concept here. It's a luxury, like spices or shoes that match. And yet, even in this cramped, noisy, blanketless tangle of limbs, people somehow find the time and the space and the energy. You're not judging, you're just baffled, because the numbers don't lie. Every family has at least 5 children, some have more. The midwife's hut operates on a permanent state of mild panic. Baptisms are scheduled in groups, like a celestial assembly line, and you've seen exactly 0 reliable methods of prevention unless you count whispered tea recipes and hope. So, naturally, you begin to wonder, is it love? Probably not. Is it passion? Unlikely, unless passion now includes elbowing your own child out of the way for a bit of mattress corner. Maybe it's just cold. And if you're already under the blanket and there's nowhere else to be, and you're used to the sound of goats mating 2 feet from your window, maybe you stop overthinking it. The cat doesn't help. It sits at the foot of the bed like a fluffy, silent judge, tail flicking with a rhythm that suggests disdain. You watch it narrow its eyes at the father as he attempts to extract himself from a toddler without waking her or sacrificing a limb. The cat has seen things. It knows too much. It could ruin reputations with a single meow and chooses not to, which makes it even more dangerous. You're invited to sit. You perch on a stool that wobbles with the enthusiasm of a drunk uncle and take in the scene. The mother, somehow still braiding hair while balancing a child on each hip, smiles at you like this is normal. And maybe it is. Maybe this is just what people do when the only other option after sunset is staring at the wall or darning socks in silence. A lull in conversation might lead to a glance. A glance might lead to a kiss. And a kiss, well, you've seen how fast things move in this village. You ask as politely as possible, so, how do you, find the time? Which earns you a look like you've just asked where clouds go at night. The mother shrugs. Nights long, she says, as if that explains everything. Maybe it does. You think about your own sleeping arrangements. The thin blanket, the constant draft, the creaking floorboards that announce every step like a town crier. You imagine trying to share something intimate in a room where the fire never stays lit and someone is always coughing. And yet, it keeps happening. People keep having children with the kind of consistency usually reserved for tax collection and the arrival of mud season. One of the children hands you a rock. It is, to his credit, a very good rock. Smooth, round, slightly warm from his grubby palm. He announces, "This is my rock," like he's giving you a family heirloom. You thank him. Another child immediately bursts into tears because it was her rock, obviously, and now the noise returns to its usual symphony of chaos and betrayal. The father leans over and mutters, "We used to think we'd just have one." You blink. He nods solemnly. One turned into two. Two turned into four. There's a pause. We don't talk about the fifth. You don't ask. You just nod, like that's a perfectly logical statement. In this village, it probably is. By the time you leave, your bread offering is half devoured, and you've been hugged by at least 3 children and licked by one of them. You're not sure which. You step outside into the cool evening air, trying to process what you've seen. Behind you, the door closes, and the sounds continue. Laughter, yelling, a lullaby that's somehow still off-key. The cat watches you from the windowsill with a look that says, "You'll be next." And maybe it's right. Maybe it's not about desire or romance or even boredom. Maybe it's about survival, about warmth, about carving something tender out of the endless labor and muck. Maybe having children is the village's only form of legacy, the only thing that outlasts bad harvests and rough winters and gossip that spreads faster than fire. You walk past another cottage and see a similar scene. 2 parents, 4 kids, one corner of the bed claimed by a dog with abandonment issues. Same setup, different names. You pass the midwife's hut. There's a line already forming. You pass the tavern. Someone jokes about the next one being twins. And as you head home, you realize that in a place where life is short, uncertain, and made mostly of mud and barley, maybe making more life isn't just a habit. Maybe it's hope. Or maybe they just really, really hate sleeping alone. You sit in the pew, ankles stiff, back straight, and soul allegedly in danger. The church smells like beeswax, wet wool, and old secrets, which feels appropriate given what's about to unfold. Father Aldrich steps up to the pulpit with the weariness of a man who's had to give this particular sermon far too many times without ever naming the thing it's actually about. He adjusts his robe, clears his throat like it owes him something, and begins. "Brothers and sisters," he says, "the path of righteousness is narrow and can be quite slippery when damp." You are immediately alert. He pauses, as if realizing that was not the metaphor to open with, then moves on, eyes darting nervously across the congregation like he's hoping someone will interrupt and fake a seizure. No one does. You glance around. The baker's wife sits 2 rows up, with her hands folded so tightly they've turned purple. The shepherd boy, who definitely did something scandalous behind the granary last week, stares at the ceiling like he's just remembered clouds exist. Your own aunt sits beside you, muttering prayers under her breath with the enthusiasm of someone trying to drown out a conversation they're dying to hear. Father Aldrich continues, valiantly. There is a temptation, like a flame near dry hay. It seems small, flickering, harmless. His voice rises slightly, a beat of drama, but left unchecked, it can consume the entire barn. A sharp cough from the back. Someone whispers, "That actually happened last spring." He ignores them. "We must guard our bundles of firewood," he says, "lest the devil spark his mischief in our midst." He blinks rapidly, as if he's not entirely sure where the metaphor ends or what the firewood represents anymore. You start trying to decode it, but give up somewhere between bundles and mischief. It could mean anything. It probably means everything. Lust, he finally says, whispering it like the word might crawl out and bite someone. The word lands in the room with the grace of a dropped sausage. It's the first time he's said it outright, and the effect is immediate. People shift, cough, pretend to adjust cloaks. One woman gasps so softly it sounds like a breeze being politely scandalized. He backpedals instantly. Or, rather, desire that is not holy, that which separates the soul from the Lord's clean laundry line. You're certain that isn't a phrase from Scripture. The sermon continues, winding through increasingly unrelated metaphors. There is a story about a sheep who wandered too far from the flock and was ensnared by wild oats. There's something about a man who let his loaf rise too eagerly, and you are now certain that the bread metaphors are getting out of hand. At one point, he warns against inappropriate kneading, and your mind shuts down entirely for self-defense. What's worse is that no one else seems fazed. The villagers nod solemnly, as if they're absorbing a profound lesson and not being subjected to one man's struggle to warn against carnal urges, using only kitchen terminology and agricultural disasters. You wonder if they're all pretending to understand, the way you do when someone starts describing the tax codes, or if they've just heard this so many times they've learned to translate. He finishes with a plea for purity that sounds more like a cry for help and a reminder to confess regularly, especially after moments of passionate error. His eyes land briefly on the blacksmith's daughter, who visibly flinches. You remember the hay pile of last month and realize this entire sermon might be subtweeting half the congregation. After the final hymn, something mournful involving lambs, obviously, you file out into the cold sunlight, brain buzzing with questions. You pull aside your cousin, who seems less traumatized than you, and ask, "Did any of that make sense to you?" She shrugs. "Not really. I think the bread meant genitals." You nod slowly, as if that helps. Behind you, Father Aldrich shakes hands with villagers, offering blessings with the dead-eyed smile of someone who's used up all his good metaphors for the year. You catch the eye of the miller's apprentice, who mouths the word loaf at you and immediately breaks into silent laughter. You vow to never look at dough the same way again. Later, around the communal fire, the sermon gets rehashed, distorted, and expanded, until someone swears Father Aldrich once said that unclean thoughts cause milk to sour. Someone else claims that lust is why it rained on St. Winifred's Day. Your great-uncle leans in and mutters, when he says gather the sheaves, he means thighs, which sends you into an existential spiral from which you may never recover. You sit in silence, staring into the flames, wondering what exactly you're meant to feel guilty about. Everything, probably. That seems to be the safe choice. You think of the barn sounds, the secret glances, the way a hand brushing yours during harvest feels like an entire chapter of a book you're not allowed to read. You think of how much of life is filtered through metaphor, how rarely anyone says the real thing, and how tired Father Aldrich looked, trying to hold it all together with bread analogies and sheep drama. Eventually, you head home under a moon that feels too knowing. You lie on your back in the dark, listening to the sounds of the village. The wind, the occasional snore, the distant creak of something that might be a barn door or something significantly more interesting. You wonder if there's a better way to learn. If someday, somewhere, someone will just explain it all plainly, without metaphors or warnings or catastrophic bread imagery. But not here. Not yet. The door closes with a clack that resonates all the way into your soul. A bolt. An actual, functioning bolt. Not a stick wedged diagonally into a mud brick notch or a pile of shoes as passive-aggressive barrier. A real iron mechanism that slides with purpose and finality. You stare at it like it's witchcraft. Your friend, Alric, doesn't even notice your awe. He's too busy offering you a half-munched carrot and telling you to ignore the goat who has already claimed your left foot as a salt lick. You've been in many cottages. You've sat on uneven stools, shared blankets that smell like fermented turnip, and once watched a grown man eat stew directly from a ladle with the speed and panic of someone who feared it might escape. But never, not once, have you seen a bolt. You eye it again to make sure it's real and not a hallucination brought on by that medicinal tea the herb woman gave you after your mysterious rash. It gleams in the candlelight, and you begin to suspect you are in the home of aristocracy, disguised as common folk. Alric sees you staring. "Oh, that?" he says casually. "My uncle brought it back from the city. Thought it might keep the pigs out." You nod, even though you both know the pigs aren't the problem. Pigs don't knock. Pigs don't open doors slowly and dramatically to announce their presence. Pigs don't whisper, "Sorry, I just need the broom," while catching full view of a situation that broom retrieval did not require. But this bolt is power. You hear a noise through the wall. It starts small, a rhythmic thump, soft enough to be mistaken for bread being kneaded, but persistent enough to be not bread. You freeze mid-carrot bite and tilt your head, the way dogs do when they hear someone say, "Walk." Alric notices, and his face goes pink. "Oh, right. My sister's in with her husband," he mutters, suddenly very interested in rearranging the straw pile. You pause. There are a lot of things you've overheard in this village. Shouts, goats in the throes of romantic confusion, a woman once screaming about yeast. But this is new. This is behind a bolted door. This is intentional. The sound continues, the kind of noise that implies cooperation and effort and possibly joy, though it's hard to be sure, because it's also accompanied by what can only be described as a gasp, chuckle, snort hybrid. You look at Alric, who is now aggressively chewing on the end of a stick, like it owes him money. So, you begin, unsure what you're even asking. He shrugs. They're married. It's their bedchamber. You stare at him like he's grown a second head. A bedchamber? Not a corner curtained off with a quilt and an optimistic attitude? Not a hayloft where the goats provide unblinking judgment? An actual space, separated by a wall, with a door that bolts from the inside? You begin to doubt everything you've ever known. The noise becomes more enthusiastic. You pretend to sneeze. Alric pretends not to hear. The goat on your foot stares at you with unblinking intensity. You think about how much effort has gone into not hearing in this village. How many conversations have gotten louder, or songs been sung with greater fervor, simply to drown out life happening too close. But now, here, it's undeniable. You sit, awkward and acutely aware of your limbs. You imagine the couple on the other side. A real couple, not hypothetical figures from whispered barn tales or innuendo-laced sermon metaphors. You imagine them touching, not in the rushed, itchy way you're used to, but with actual intention. Privacy changes things. Space changes things. No fear of Auntie Mathilde bursting in with a jar of pickled onions and a judgmental glare. No cousins wrestling in the next bed over. Just a bolt, a wall, and time. You can't decide if it's romantic or terrifying. Eventually, the noise stops. A murmur of voices, a laugh, then silence, thick and content, like warm stew after a long fast. You don't look at Alric, and he doesn't look at you. The goat finally loses interest and begins chewing on the broom instead. You think about your own home. How many times you've laid in bed pretending to be asleep while someone crept in or out of the room. How nothing is ever really private, just temporarily obscured. And how somehow, despite the lack of space or locks or even personal belongings, life keeps happening. Loudly, inelegantly, unavoidably. Alric breaks the silence. Want to go outside? You nod too quickly. You escape into the open air like a monk fleeing temptation. Except instead of temptation, it's the uncomfortable realization that doors can be more than a suggestion. You sit on the fence and stare at the stars, which don't have bolts and can't be blamed for anything. Alric hands you a crust of bread. You eat it without thinking, chewing through your thoughts like a cud-chewing cow of confusion. You think it's always like that? You ask finally, Because you can't not, he snorts. Doubt it. Sometimes there's yelling. Last week he knocked over the candle and she threatened to shave his head. You nod. That feels more familiar, but still. That bolt, that room, the idea that someone, somewhere, could choose when to be alone together. Not just hope for it, or bargain with the weather, or pray the chickens stay asleep. That's a kind of wealth no one talks about. Not gold, not land, just the luxury of a locked door. You wonder what you'd do with one. Would it be used for passion, privacy, or just a nap without someone's elbow in your ribs? Probably all three. You head home eventually, through dark paths and damp grass, past windows glowing faintly with firelight, and the muffled sounds of families trying to live and love and laugh all in the same 12 square feet. You reach your door, unbolt the stick wedged between it and the dirt, and step inside. Your cousin is already asleep on the floor. Your uncle snores beside the hearth. You slip under the blanket, careful not to disturb anyone, and close your eyes. And just before sleep takes you, you imagine a bolt, a real one, smooth and cold and powerful. And the silence that might follow. The sock is the first to go. It slips from your hand mid-squeeze and begins its slow, tragic journey down the muddy river like a tiny woolen ship setting sail into a sea of missed chances. You watch it float past a clump of reeds, then disappear behind the curve of a rock, never to be seen again unless it resurfaces as part of a scarecrow or a particularly uninspired puppet. You consider diving after it, but the water is ankle-numbing and full of things that nibble, and more importantly, he is watching you. He, in this case, being Edrig, son of thatched-roof Gertie, possessor of 2 strong arms and an awkward smile that keeps finding its way directly at your face. He stands across from you on the riverbank with his sleeves rolled up, and a smudge of something, mud, ash, hope, on his cheek. He is attempting to rinse what might once have been a shirt, but now resembles a rag used to mop up stew and regret. You know he sees the sock float away. You know because he tilts his head and says, "Was that yours?" With the exact tone of someone who knows it was and is about to say something unreasonably charming. You mutter something about currents, dignity, and laundry-related casualties. He grins, and it's the kind of grin that makes you forget that you're standing knee-deep in a questionable stream with leeches lurking somewhere beneath your left foot. You go back to scrubbing, aggressively now, as though the sock's betrayal can be punished through its surviving kin. You don't look up, but you're aware of him, the way his arms move, the way his laugh catches when someone upstream slips on moss and curses like a holy man with a stubbed toe. Laundry day was supposed to be safe, routine, women upstream, men downstream, a kind of wet, soapy choreography that ensured minimal scandal and maximum sock retrieval. But today, something's shifted. You ended up too close, too downstream, too near the place where flirtation grows like mold on old cheese. Unwanted, inevitable, and slightly thrilling. Your mother, further down the bank, catches your eye. She doesn't say anything, but her expression speaks volumes in the universal language of maternal judgment. Her mouth is a line. Her eyes are squinted. She is wringing a tunic with the precision of someone imagining it's the neck of whoever is distracting you from doing things properly. You attempt to act normal, which in this context means splashing yourself in the face with soap-scented water and dropping a second sock. This one lands directly on Edrig's foot. He blinks down at it, then back at you. You consider pretending it's not yours, but it's lumpy and patched, and your grandmother embroidered a crooked heart on the heel 2 winters ago. Denial is not an option. He bends down, picks it up, and walks over. The river is shallow here, but the distance between you feels perilous. He steps closer, slowly, like he's worried you'll bolt into the woods or call down divine wrath. You don't. Mostly because you are frozen in a complex stew of embarrassment, curiosity, and whatever emotion involves sweating behind the knees. He holds out the sock. You reach for it. Your fingers touch. You both look at your hands like they've just brokered a treaty between rival kingdoms. It's just a sock. It's always just a sock. Until it's not. I think it likes me, he says. You snort. Actually snort. The kind that echoes off the water and makes a goose honk in solidarity somewhere upstream. You want to sink into the river and let the current carry you away, preferably to a time before he saw your laundry, your blush, or the unfortunate splash mark on your hem that looks vaguely like a pig. But he smiles again, less awkward this time, and it's worse somehow because now you're charmed. You, genuinely charmed. By a boy holding your soggy heart-heel sock like it's a relic. Your mother sighs loud enough to part clouds. He doesn't hand the sock back immediately. He just looks at it, then at you, then at the water, then back at you. We could, walk. After. After what? You ask, because apparently the ability to flirt back has fled your body along with your balance. After laundry. He glances at your mother. When we're not supervised by wrath and a headscarf, you cover a laugh with your sleeve. Maybe, that's it. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a maybe. But it hangs in the air like a spark over dry hay. Not quite a fire, but almost. You take the sock. He goes back to his side. You go back to pretending your blood isn't boiling. Your mother mutters something about temptresses and wet feet. The sky stays mercifully cloudy so no one can see your face clearly. Later, you pack up the basket. Lighter than it should be, because the sock you never retrieved is halfway to the next village by now. You walk past Edrig on your way home. He doesn't say anything. He just grins again. You look ahead, dignity reassembled, posture stiff, heart racing like a badly trained hunting dog. The sock dries on the line that evening, crooked heart blinking at you like it knows what it did. Your mother says nothing. Your aunt mentions that laundry day is turning into a den of impropriety and someone should bring back public shaming stocks. You nod, pretend to agree, and don't meet her eyes. You go to bed with the faint sound of the river in your ears and the feeling of his fingers just brushing yours, still lingering like warmth in your palms. You dream of laundry lines and bolts on doors and what might happen after. After laundry. After maybe. After all. You time your escape like a thief planning a heist. The sun has dipped just far enough behind the trees to give you cover, but not so far that it's suspicious. Suspicious is when you disappear in full dark, like the time Marta went to fetch turnips after moonrise and came back without turnips, a visible hickey, and a new limp. You don't want that kind of attention. Just the kind that comes from someone remembering the way you laughed when you nearly dropped a pail on their foot, or the time you threw a lump of cheese at their head and missed on purpose. The barn is quieter than usual, which is rare because something is always giving birth or plotting escape. You glance around before slipping inside, though the only witness appears to be a cat sitting on a windowsill, judging you with the patience of a monk who's seen generations make the same mistakes. You approach the ladder with reverence and dread. It is not a quiet ladder. It is not a trustworthy ladder. It is a rickety wooden tell-all whose every step squeaks like a child being denied a second bowl of porridge. You try to distribute your weight like you've seen goats do. Light, nimble, defying physics and reason. But the second your foot lands on the third rung, it groans like it's about to narrate your sins to the entire village. You freeze. Nothing stirs. You try again, slower, holding your breath, which helps nothing and causes your cheeks to puff like a startled trout. Each creak feels louder than the last. You consider abandoning the whole idea and pretending you came to inspect the structural integrity of the loft, but then a voice, his voice, whispers your name from above. It's not dramatic. It's not poetic. It's soft, like the beginning of a secret, and somehow that makes it worse, or better, depending on how you define regret. You reach the top, finally, and there he is, straw in his hair, straw in his shirt, straw everywhere, because straw respects neither boundaries nor dignity. He's sitting with his knees pulled up, arms resting on them, trying to look casual, but his grin gives him away. That and the fact that he's clearly bathed for this. You catch the faint scent of mint, maybe stolen from the herb garden, or maybe just a generous rubbing of kitchen water that passed too near the spice rack. You sit beside him. The hay pokes your legs through the fabric of your skirt, and you shift until you find a patch that feels only moderately stabby. The light filters through the slats in soft beams, making everything feel a bit more sacred than it probably deserves to. You both pretend this is normal, that people sneak off to barns to sit near each other for totally innocent reasons, like counting rats, or contemplating that one chicken who seems to be plotting a coup. Conversation comes slowly, not because you have nothing to say, but because words feel risky in a space that's already vibrating with possibility. He says something about the weather. You nod. You say something about the market. He agrees. Then silence, thick and meaningful, like the kind that comes before thunder or very bad decisions. His hand brushes yours. You pretend it didn't, not out of shyness, but because if you acknowledge it, it becomes real, and real is terrifying. Real means consequences and rumors and your aunt's knowing smirk over breakfast. But then he does it again, more on purpose this time, and now your hands are not brushing. They are holding. Fingers intertwining like they were meant to, which they weren't. Not really, because you've both got calluses, and at least one of you has straw between your knuckles. Still, you breathe. He breathes. Somewhere below, a goat sneezes. Then he leans in, and the latter, ever loyal to the cause of absolute mortification, gives a long, slow squeal that sounds precisely like guilt, manifesting as noise. You both jolt apart like startled squirrels, wide-eyed and sweating. A beat of silence, then laughter, too loud and too fast, the kind that spills out when panic and desire collide and create something neither of you knows how to hold. You shush each other mid-laugh, which somehow makes it worse. The chickens rustle below. You hear one cluck, judgmentally. You can almost feel it thinking, "Again? Really?" You look at him, and he looks at you. And you both dissolve into giggles that are probably not appropriate for the context but feel entirely necessary. When it settles, you sit closer, shoulder to shoulder. No bold moves, no dramatic declarations. Just quiet, warm closeness in the middle of a barn that smells like animals, old wood, and something beginning. You talk this time about things that don't matter, like whether bread should have seeds, or who actually started the fire in the Thatcher's shed 2 springs ago. But it matters, because you're talking, because he listens, because his laugh crinkles the corners of his eyes, and when he looks at you, it feels like he sees something other than just another villager in another heap of straw. Eventually, you both know it's time to go. The sun's gone down, and the longer you stay, the harder it is to pretend this was just a conversation about grain prices. You climb down first. The ladder moans again, but you're too tired to care. Your feet hit the ground, and you dust yourself off like that helps. He follows, slower, and you wait by the door. No one's there. Or if they are, they're being very quiet about it. You step out into the night, cool air rushing to meet your cheeks, and you realize you are smiling. Your hair is full of hay. Your skirt has a rip. You smell like barn. And somehow, you've never felt more like yourself. Behind you, the ladder groans once more. You close the barn door and bolt it, not for secrecy, but for memory. The well women are there before the sun finishes stretching. Like bats with better posture and significantly louder opinions, they hover over the stone lip of the village, well as though they were born from it. You try to arrive early, bucket in hand, eyes on the ground, hoping to draw water and dignity in equal measure. But they're already there, churning gossip like butter, fast, salty, and not always fresh. You're almost past them when it happens. That tiny hitch in your step, it's not even a limp, more like a sway, a post-barn looseness, a subtle ache in your thighs that says, "Yes, I climbed a squeaky ladder last night, and no, I did not do it alone." They see it instantly. Three heads swivel in your direction as if pulled by the same string. Wilfrida, Agnes, and Maud. The holy trinity of rural surveillance. Their eyes narrow, their lips purse. They do not speak, but they do inhale, deeply, as if smelling scandal baked into your very bones. You don't meet their gaze. You grip your bucket like it's a shield and walk straight to the well, feet betraying you by crunching too loudly on the gravel. You should have oiled your joints or something. You could have limped with purpose and claimed you fell off a cart or wrestled a boar, but now it's too late. The bucket clinks against the stone. The silence thickens. Agnes is the first to speak. "Mornin'," she says, drawing out the word like it owes her rent. You nod. You smile too tightly, and it feels like lying with your teeth. Wilfrida hums, just a hum, no words, but in it lives the sound of 17 winters' worth of passive aggression and 100 whispered birth stories. You look up. Mistake. She's watching you over the rim of her shawl, eyes glittering with the same look she gave Ethelred the blacksmith after his third wife, mysteriously, went to visit cousins and never came back. Well, youth will be youth, Maud mutters, pretending to inspect her rope, and sin will be visible. You drop your bucket. It clatters, splashing water and shame across your boots. The sound is deafening in the still morning. Behind you, Wilfrida wheezes. You realize with horror that she is laughing. A low, creaky barn door kind of laugh. The sound of a woman who has seen it all and lived to retell it with creative exaggeration. You scramble for your bucket, cheeks blazing hotter than midsummer bread ovens. But your fingers are clumsy, and the handle slips again. More laughter. Agnes now, a high-pitched snort. Maud just clucks her tongue and says, "Careful now. Looks like someone's hips are sore." You want to melt into the ground, or fake a sudden plague, or claim demonic possession. Anything but stand here like a guilty loaf, while three ancient women perform a full-body post-mortem of your night, based solely on how awkwardly you're walking, and the slightly too happy expression you forgot to wipe off your face. They don't ask questions directly. That would be too merciful. Instead, they speak in metaphors and parables, as if morality is best served with a side of dramatic flair. Back in my day, Agnes says, drawing up her pail slowly, we kept our straw in the barn, not in our skirts. You're assuming she made it to the straw, Wilfrida counters. Could have been just the loft floor, sawdust and a prayer. Maud says, eyes twinkling. Hope she prayed hard. You clutch your bucket, like it might save you from drowning in this soup of innuendo. You want to argue. You want to say it's none of their business. You want to remind them that they've each got more children than teeth and fewer wedding rings than sons. But you don't, because you know how this works. The well is not just for water. It is for stories. It is where secrets get strained, sifted, and served up with morning dew and a generous helping of judgment. You came here thinking you could outwalk gossip. You were wrong. Still, something in you straightens. Not much, just enough. You hoist your full bucket with a grunt, square your shoulders, and prepare to walk past them. Their eyes follow. You feel like a roasted goose in a market stall, but then Wilfrida leans in, stage whispers. Was it the miller's boy? Or that ginger one from the next hamlet? The one with the teeth? Your eyebrows rise, despite yourself. Definitely not the one with the teeth, you say before you can stop. A pause, then Maud howls, not a laugh. A proper howl, like a witch in the woods or a pig discovering soap. Agnes slaps her knee. Wilfrida fans herself with her bonnet. For a second, just one. You're not the subject of the story. You're the teller. Careful, you say, as you step past, or you'll miss your own buckets. There's a note of velment. They keep cackling, louder now, louder than they need to. You know they'll embellish the tale by supper. By then, you'll have 3 lovers, a barn key hidden in your corset, and probably an elopement planned. But for now, you walk away with your pail full, your spine straight, and your shame manageable. Behind you, someone says, "Young bones." They bounce back fast. You don't turn around. You keep walking, and you let them talk. You find it tucked beneath the turnip basket, half hidden like shame or someone's third child. At first, you think it's just a stick, because it is, technically. But then you see the marks. Not the usual worm grooves or splinters from aggressive whittling, but careful, deliberate scratches. One heart, slightly uneven. One symbol that might be a bird or a very optimistic eel. You hold it in your palm like it's spun gold, even though it pokes your thumb and smells faintly of dog. This is your love letter. You try not to smile. Smiling makes things real. And reality, in this village, is followed by consequences, sermons, and your grandmother's frown that could curdle fresh cream. Still, it's hard not to feel something stir in your chest. Affection, amusement, mild confusion about whether the second symbol means yours forever or meet me by the fish pond. You stash it in your apron, tucked next to a bit of stale bread and a beetle you hope didn't notice. You tell yourself it's just a silly thing, a joke, boys and their wood. But later, you pull it out again, trace the carvings with your nail, and feel something that might be longing or indigestion. This is courtship. Not roses, not poetry, just sharpened sticks and boldness poorly disguised as subtlety. He doesn't hand them to you. That would be too obvious, too direct. Instead, you find them like clues in a very slow scavenger hunt, where the prize might be romance or possibly tetanus. One day, it's a stone with your initials scratched beside his. Another, it's a piece of bark, shaped like a heart, jammed into the crack of your door so hard it chips the frame. Once, he gives you a dirt pattern, not flowers, just a drawing in the mud, using his foot and too much confidence. The design is a mystery. Could be a squirrel. Could be an anatomically incorrect guess at a woman. Either way, you blush. Not because it's good, but because someone tried. Someone risked looking foolish to say something without saying it. No one speaks of it, of course. That would ruin everything. If you brought up the stick, he'd pretend it was for the dog. If you mentioned the dirt squirrel, he'd claim he was stomping a beetle. But when you pass him in the field, he looks at you with a kind of pride usually reserved for new calves or very symmetrical loaves. And that's enough. You start a collection, hidden under your straw mattress, in a crevice behind the chimney, even inside an old boot you've convinced your mother is now for special storage. Each stick, stone, and scrawled mystery becomes a language. A secret alphabet shared only between you and someone who can't spell but can carve a mean fish shape. One day, he gets ambitious. You find a wooden spoon in your wash basin. Not new, not even clean, but it has your name. Well, most of your name, carved into the handle. The E is backwards, and he's added a flower that looks like it lost a fight. You nearly drop it in the pig slop from sheer affection. You wear it in your belt like a relic until your aunt sees it. She raises one eyebrow, the way she did when she found your cousin kissing the ale boy behind the stables. "New spoon?" she asks, casual like a snake in tall grass. You nod. She hums. Later that night, she's sitting by the fire, peeling apples with a knife that could also serve in minor surgery. She doesn't look at you when she says, "Careful who you let carve things. First it's a stick, then it's your future." You choke on your stew. The thing is, she's not wrong. Carved wood is serious. In a place where no one writes, and paper's more rare than rain in midsummer, this is as close as you get to vows, or at least heavy implication. Your mother says nothing, but the next day your chores mysteriously double. The spoon disappears. You mourn it quietly, then find it again 3 days later in the chicken coop, reeking of indignation and poultry. You clean it and hide it better. He switches to stones after that. You find one shaped like a heart with what looks like a dagger through it. Or maybe it's just cracked. Still, You press it to your lips like a knight's token before battle, even if it tastes like dirt and questionable intent. Sometimes, you wonder what these messages mean to him, if he worries over them, if he picks the smoothest stick, sits under a tree, and carves with his tongue poking out in concentration, or if he grabs the first twig he sees and jabs it with a nail because he's too nervous to speak. Either way, it feels like something true. You start leaving things too. A berry on his doorstep, a sprig of mint tucked into the hem of his tunic when he's not looking. One time, you scratch his name into the edge of a log by the river and cover it with moss. You don't know if he'll find it. You don't know if he's looking, but it feels important. Then, one day, you get nothing. No stick, no stone, not even a misshapen dirt flower. You pretend it doesn't bother you. You kick the mud too hard. You scowl at the pigs. You shout at your brother for breathing too loudly. But inside, something curls. Something small and tender and afraid it was all a game. That maybe the spoon was just a spoon and the squirrel was just a squirrel. Then you find it, behind the shed, nailed to the post. A piece of wood, larger than usual. The carving rough but deep. Your full name, spelled right this time, 2 hearts, and, incredibly, a small drawing of what might be 2 people, holding hands. You run your fingers over the grooves, feel the splinters catch on your skin, and smile. It's not paper. It's not ink. It's not poetry, but it's yours. The minstrel arrives just before midday, like a poorly timed omen, or a cousin who shows up only when there's bread. His boots are dusty, his teeth suspiciously white, and his lute has more ribbons on it than the maypole in spring. You know, instantly, that this man is trouble, not the criminal kind, the lyrical kind, the kind that rhymes maiden with forbidden haven, and somehow makes it sound suggestive. He's smiling like he knows something you don't, which is likely true and also deeply unsettling. The villagers gather like chickens to spilled grain. You're squinting in the sunlight, caught between suspicion and excitement. No one's had real entertainment since old Walter tried to do a backflip after 2 ales and became legend of the broken hip. So when the minstrel says he'll sing a tale of passion and valor, the crowd leans in. Even the goats stop chewing. It starts off innocent. There's a knight, a lady, some vague mention of a forest that breathes with longing. Everyone nods politely, enjoying the novelty of hearing something that doesn't involve grain prices or Cousin Edric's rash. But then it turns. The lady, apparently, has eyes like cider and lips made for rebellion. The knight removes his armor of shame, and suddenly, metaphors are flying like arrows at a tournament run by drunkards. The swans come next. Not literal swans. Swans as a symbol for, well, the problem is, no one's quite sure. But the way he sings about their trembling necks and graceful plunge into passion's pond makes everyone deeply uncomfortable and yet unable to look away. Mrs. Cuthbert gasps. A child asks what a moaning moonbeam of the groin is. The priest coughs so hard he nearly launches his cassock into the fire. You glance around. Some people are pretending not to listen, which would be more convincing if they weren't leaning in. Others have turned red in the face, possibly from outrage, possibly from trying to suppress laughter. One of the well-women fans herself with her apron, whispering scandalous, like it's a spell to ward off demons. The minstrel is enjoying himself far too much. His eyes twinkle with the energy of someone who knows exactly how far the line is and is skipping over it in velvet boots. He strums harder. The tale grows more lurid. There's mention of loosening laces beneath a willow's sigh, and something about trousers that whisper against destiny. You don't even know if that's grammatically correct, but the tone is unmistakable. Then comes the verse about the baker's daughter and the flour sack. It begins innocently enough. A rustic romance, a man with dough-stained hands, and a dream. But by the time the minstrel gets to the line about needing more than bread in the moon's forgiving light, the priest makes a noise like a boiling kettle and actually staggers. His face is the color of ripe beetroot. He raises a trembling hand and says, "Enough." But the minstrel mistakes it for applause and launches into a chorus. You're laughing. You don't mean to. You try to hide it behind your hand, but it bubbles out like soup left too long on the fire. You can't help it. It's absurd. It's chaotic. It's everything no one says out loud but clearly thinks. The man beside you is wiping tears from his eyes. The man on the other side has forgotten his goat, who is now trying to eat the lute's ribbons. Finally, the priest stands. Not with fury, exactly, but with the desperate dignity of a man who fears he's moments away from losing his entire congregation to rhymed obscenity. "This," he says, "is not suitable for ears so innocent." His voice cracks on innocent, which is ironic, given the crowd. The minstrel bows, unfazed. He says something about the power of storytelling and how even the Bible has its fair share of passion. The priest glares at him like he might declare holy war. A child asks what throbbing desire means. Someone pretends not to hear. The rest of you pretend not to exist. That evening, the village hums with a strange energy. No one talks about the song, not directly, but snippets echo through the air like smoke from a badly controlled fire. Swans, can you believe it? I never trusted that willow. Did he say sighing thigh, or did I hallucinate that? Even the sheep seem vaguely aware that something has shifted. You see the minstrel once more before he leaves, lounging near the well like he owns it. He winks at you. You don't wink back, but your ears burn. You want to ask him what it all meant. Whether he was being poetic or just rude, whether the flour sack thing was based on something real, but you don't. You just nod, and he nods back, and that's enough. The next Sunday, Father Aldrich delivers a sermon titled, "The Dangers of Loose Lutes and Looser Morals." He speaks for 45 minutes and never once says the word lust, but you understand him perfectly. The minstrel is already gone, off to the next village, no doubt spreading metaphors like seeds on wind, but you'll remember him, and the song, and the sound of an entire village realizing, all at once, that maybe sin has a pretty good rhythm. You don't talk about it, but you hum the chorus when no one's listening. The feast begins innocently enough, as most catastrophes do. A bonfire, a barrel of mead that tastes suspiciously like someone strained it through their boots, and an entire pig roasted until it resembles both triumph and indigestion. The village gathers, buzzing with the rare excitement of an evening where no one has to churn butter or argue about grain tithes. Torches flicker, shadows stretch, and already you can feel the hum of something brewing beneath the music and laughter. You swear you'll behave. You tell yourself this firmly, like a commandment. You'll eat, you'll clap politely for the fiddler, you'll maybe dance once and then go home before anything suspicious happens. But then a wooden cup is shoved into your hand. The liquid inside is gold, fragrant, and entirely deceptive. You sip. It's sweet, gentle, like honey kissed by a flower. You sip again, and again. By the fourth, your legs feel lighter than straw, and your judgment has been left somewhere by the fire with the goat who's already trying to lick the spit-roasted pig. The music swells. Someone grabs your hand. You're pulled into a circle of dancers, feet pounding the earth in a rhythm older than memory. The ground seems to bounce, the stars spin, and your body decides it can absolutely keep up, despite all evidence to the contrary. When you stumble, someone catches you. Warm fingers on your arm, a grin too close to your face. It's Edrig, or Alric, or maybe both, because at this point names are irrelevant, and all that matters is the way your stomach flips like a fish in a bucket. You laugh. He laughs. The circle spins faster. Suddenly, you're pressed against the bread cart, out of the circle, out of breath, and very much aware that someone's lips are on yours. It's clumsy, rushed, tasting of mead and smoke and slightly burnt pork, but it's real, too real. You pull back, blinking, And he says something about how your hair smells like river mint. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a vague observation, but it doesn't matter because you're already leaning in again. Then, someone clears their throat. You freeze. It's a cousin. His? Yours? At this point, family trees are more like tangled hedges, and in the dark, you can't tell who belongs to which branch. All you know is that he's watching, grinning, and apparently misinterpreting the situation entirely. Because the next words out of your mouth, meant as a laugh, meant as a joke, meant as a ridiculous thing no one should take seriously, are, "What if we married then?" The cousin gasps like you've announced you've seen God naked. Then, he beams. "Yes," he says. "Of course, yes." You blink. He nods, enthusiastically enough to spill half his mead down his tunic. People nearby look over. Someone shouts, "She said yes." And suddenly, a circle is forming again, but not for dancing, for celebrating. Celebrating you and him. Whoever he is, you try to clarify. You wave your hands. You say things like, "No, I meant, hypothetically." But hypotheticals don't exist here. Everything is literal, permanent, binding, especially when shouted within earshot of the well women. Already, Maud is squealing, a match, while Wilfrida begins muttering about dowries and how you'd better start weaving more linens. You want the earth to open up and swallow you. Instead, someone thrusts more mead into your hand. You drink it, because at this point, drowning seems faster. The night spirals. You dance again, this time with your accidental fiancé, who steps on your toes but beams like he's conquered France. People clap you on the back, wishing you happiness and healthy offspring. Someone starts singing a ballad about unions blessed by fire, and you're pretty sure the priest is crying into his hands. You try again to explain, but your words are drowned by music and laughter, and the steady chant of "wedding, wedding," led by the village children, who are too young to know what they're chanting for but love the rhythm. At some point, you retreat to the edge of the fire, dizzy and horrified. Edrig, definitely Edrig this time, finds you, shaking with laughter. "You're engaged to my cousin," he says, gleeful. And he's serious. You bury your face in your hands. The cousin waves at you from across the fire, already planning names for your first child. The flames crackle. The mead sloshes. The stars look like they're mocking you. And you, poor fool, are left with the knowledge that a single misplaced sentence has turned into a binding social contract that 3 villages will gossip about for the rest of the season. You walk home at dawn, head pounding, dignity in shreds. Your mother is waiting, arms crossed, eyebrow arched. "So," she says, "you're betrothed now?" You groan. She smirks. And from outside, you hear Maud's voice drifting over the morning air, already telling someone that the match was sealed, with a kiss, a cup, and the blessing of the fire itself. You collapse onto your straw bed, swearing you'll never drink again. But deep down, you know the next feast will come. The next cup will be thrust into your hand, and history, like a goat at a feast, will repeat itself. It begins quietly, as these things always do. Someone faints near the bread stall, and everyone pretends it's from heat, even though it's midwinter and the only heat in the village is the kind that makes pigs steam when they exhale. Another girl spends mornings clutching her stomach, and the word indigestion gets thrown around with suspicious frequency, as though the entire village has collectively decided turnips are suddenly that dangerous. By the 3rd case of mystery illness, you stop believing in coincidence. No one says the word. They never do. Instead, euphemisms sprout like weeds after rain. She's under the weather. She's carrying light in her cheeks. She's blessed with fullness. All of these are said with voices dripping in implication, while the subject in question walks by with a basket strategically large enough to shield her midsection. Baskets are everywhere now. Laundry baskets, bread baskets. One girl even starts carrying an empty basket just for appearances. You watch it all and wonder if the village's true harvest season is less about barley and more about babies. The well women know first, of course. They always know. They sit around the rim like crows dressed in shawls, clucking about who's been glowing and who's been sickly. Glow and sick are, apparently, the same condition, though one is whispered approvingly and the other scandalously. You draw water and hear Wolfrida mutter, "That one's walking careful," followed by Maud hissing, "Aye, and she's carrying her apron like a shield." Agnes nods sagely, adding, "There'll be a cradle built by midsummer." You want to roll your eyes, but then you glance at the carpenter's yard and see him sanding wood in the exact shape of a tiny bed, humming to himself like it's just a normal Tuesday. The men, for their part, pretend not to know anything, which means they absolutely know everything. They start carving, quietly, deliberately, as though shaping a cradle before anyone announces anything is an act of prudence rather than a public admission. You pass by the blacksmith and see a line of miniature hinges gleaming on his workbench. You pass the shepherd and find him weaving baskets suspiciously sturdier than usual, wide enough to hold more than wool. No one says anything directly, but the village begins to hum with preparations for children who have not been officially declared. The priest begins preaching vaguely about responsibility and the fruits of temptation. He never says pregnancy. He talks about orchards instead, about trees bearing more than expected, about the danger of planting seeds in the wrong season. He says this with such seriousness that half the congregation leaves convinced they need to burn their turnip patches. You leave convinced he's seen the carpenter's new cradle and is panicking. Meanwhile, the women themselves carry on with expressions somewhere between pride and terror. You watch one girl, barely older than you, walking through the market with her shoulders squared like she's going to war. Her mother walks beside her, chin lifted, eyes daring anyone to mention baskets or glow. No one does, but you can feel the words gathering, like a storm just behind your ears. Later, at the well, the women nod knowingly again, this time with the smugness of prophets proven right. You think about the whispers, about how silence here says more than words. Everyone pretends not to notice, yet simultaneously prepares for the inevitable. It's a season, like planting or harvest. It comes, it goes, it reshapes lives in its wake. You start counting. 3 girls, then 4, then maybe 5 if you include the baker's wife who's been hiding behind flour sacks and looking vaguely seasick even on dry land. You stop at 5 because counting feels intrusive, like tallying lambs before they're born. But the number lingers in your mind, heavy and undeniable. One evening, you pass by a cottage and hear the rhythmic thump of a cradle already in use. The baby isn't born yet, but the wood is being tested, rocked, smoothed. It feels eerie, like hearing laughter in a room that's still empty. You wonder if babies sense what awaits them, if they dream themselves into existence before their mothers speak of them aloud. The gossip sharpens as spring creeps closer. Someone swears they saw May slip out of the herb woman's hut at dawn, clutching her stomach. Someone else swears they saw the miller's apprentice buying extra cloth, which everyone knows is either for swaddling or shame. The well women debate, which is more likely. You walk past them, bucket in hand, trying not to imagine your own name on their tongues, because that's the danger, isn't it? This could be anyone's story, any glance, any night, any poorly timed sip of mead. You feel the weight of it like a cloak, heavy and invisible. It's not just about them. It's about you. It's about everyone. You lie awake at night, listening to the sounds of the village, the coughs, the snores, the creak of beds too crowded. Somewhere out there, someone lies awake with a hand on her belly, wondering what will happen when the season ends and the secret is no longer secret. The next morning, the carpenter unveils another cradle. It's polished, sturdy, almost proud. He doesn't say who it's for. He doesn't need to. The season of secret pregnancies is not really secret at all. It's just a performance, a waiting game, a silence everyone agrees to until the first wail breaks it. And then, as always, life continues, louder than gossip, heavier than shame. The summons comes at dawn, carried not by a messenger, but by the look your mother gives you across the hearth. She doesn't say anything, just lifts her chin toward the door and mutters, "The midwife wants a word." That's all it takes. A cold pit forms in your stomach, heavier than porridge, sharper than guilt. You know this day comes for everyone eventually. It just feels too soon when it's your turn. The midwife lives at the edge of the village, in a cottage that smells permanently of herbs, smoke, and secrets. She's older than the church walls, but sharper than the knives the smith keeps honed for slaughtering pigs. You step inside, and the air wraps around you. Thick, heady, and unsettlingly clean, like someone's trying to cover up truths with rosemary. She doesn't greet you. Not really. She just looks up from grinding something in a mortar and gestures to the stool. You sit. The stool wobbles. Your dignity wobbles with it. She studies you with eyes that seem to peel you open like an onion, layer by embarrassing layer. "So," she says finally, in a voice that's both casual and terrifying. When your mouth goes dry, you consider pretending not to understand, but this woman has delivered half the village. She knows what a lie looks like before it leaves your lips. So you shrug, attempt a smile, and say, "Probably." One eyebrow arches, climbing her forehead like a warning flag. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't even sigh. She just reaches for a piece of wood. Smooth, flat, already scarred with other people's names and other people's stories. She dips a stick in ink and scratches something down. You lean forward to see, but she shifts her hand just enough to block it. The sound of the scratching feels like your fate being nailed to the church door. You've heard of this record. Everyone has. It's not official like the manor's ledgers or the priest's sermons. It's more dangerous than either. This is the book, or in this case, board, that remembers who said what, who swore when, who promised only once, and ended up with 7 children. You've never seen it before, but now you're in it. Etched alongside generations of mistakes, triumphs, and probablys. "Who?" she asks, as if she's inquiring about your favorite type of bread. You stammer. You choke. You glance around the room like the herbs might whisper an escape. Finally, you say a name. Not loudly, not even confidently, just enough. She writes it down, doesn't blink, doesn't comment, just scratches it into the wood as though the act itself seals it in blood. You feel a shiver run through you, because in this village, records are stronger than oaths. Once it's carved, it's real. "Anything else?" she asks. You shake your head, though you're not entirely sure what you're denying. She stares a little longer. Long enough for you to imagine she can see every night you've spent in the hay, every secret kiss behind the bread cart, every lie you've told your mother. You want to melt into the stool, but it creaks, betraying you again. Then, to your surprise, she softens, just slightly. Her mouth curves, not into a smile, but into something less like judgment and more like pity. "It'll be fine," she says, which is the kind of statement that means the exact opposite. But it's something. She stands, rummages in a basket, and thrusts a small pouch into your hands. It rattles with dried leaves and smells faintly of regret. "Tea," she explains, "for strength." She doesn't specify what kind of strength, and you're too afraid to ask. You tuck it into your apron, pretending you know what to do. Before you leave, she glances back at the wood, running her finger over the fresh scratches. "Funny thing," she mutters, mostly to herself. "This village remembers more than it forgets." Then she looks at you, sharp again. "Walk straight when you leave. People are watching." So you do. You step out into the morning light, your legs stiff, your head buzzing. Every face you pass seems to know. Children glance at you and giggle. Old women nod with lips pressed tight. Men pretend to be busy but glance up too often. You feel marked, branded, not by fire but by ink. The board in the midwife's house is heavier than chains. That night, you lie awake, staring at the rafters. You wonder what she wrote exactly. Your name? His? A date? A question mark? You wonder who will see it next, whose fingers will trace the grooves and whisper, "Ah, so that's how it was." You wonder if, centuries from now, when the wood has rotted and the memory's gone, someone will still feel the echo of your probably. You roll over, press the pouch of herbs to your chest, and try not to think about it. But you do, because once you're in the records, you never really leave. They don't call it a wedding. Weddings are for nobility, for parchment and seals and priests who don't cough their way through Latin. Here, it's just a joining. Simple, quick, wrapped in the smell of damp wool and barley. You're told to show up at the edge of the village green, and when you arrive, there's already a crowd, clutching mugs of ale and chunks of bread, their faces eager for entertainment disguised as holy ritual. Someone has dragged a goat along, though whether as witness, dowry, or uninvited guest, no one seems sure. The rain starts almost immediately, a drizzle that soaks cloaks and flattens hair, but no one moves. Weather is no excuse when gossip is on the line. The priest clears his throat, mutters something about blessings, and then has to shout over the wind to be heard. His words scatter, caught between raindrops and laughter. "Two souls bound," he cries, though it sounds more like "two souls browned," which only makes the well women snicker. You glance at your partner, your maybe partner, your probably partner, and his tunic is sticking to him like wet parchment. He grins anyway, teeth white in the gray light, as though this is exactly what he wanted. A soggy crowd and an uncertain future. Someone thrusts bread into your hands. Not symbolic bread, actual bread. A whole loaf, hard on the outside, soft on the inside, still steaming from the oven. You're told to break it together, so you do, tearing it down the middle while crumbs fall into the mud. Everyone cheers as if you've just slain a dragon, not divided carbohydrates. The priest declares this bread a symbol of union. The goat sneezes loudly, unimpressed. Next comes the ale, a shared cup, carved from wood, sloshing dangerously as it's passed to you. You're supposed to drink, pass it on, and somehow not choke while everyone watches. The liquid is bitter, frothy, stronger than you expected. It burns down your throat and fills your chest with heat, and before you know it, you're grinning too, though whether from the ale or the absurdity is unclear. When your maybe partner takes his turn, foam clings to his upper lip, and the crowd howls as though this is the height of romance. The vows aren't whispered or tender, they're shouted. The rain demands it, drumming against the earth, pounding against wool hoods. The priest bellows questions, and you bellow answers back, half laughing, half drowning. Do you take? Yes. Do you swear? Probably. The crowd loves it. They cheer each time your voice cracks, and someone starts clapping along in rhythm. At one point, a dog joins in with a howl, and the priest glares like Satan himself has come to mock the ceremony. You think it's over when the vows end, but then the goat is pushed forward again, decorated now with a wreath of damp flowers around its neck. Someone declares it the guardian of fertility, though you're fairly sure the goat didn't sign up for this. Still, you're made to pat its head, which is slick with rain and surprisingly bony. It stares at you with eyes that say, you're making a mistake. You ignore the goat. The rain thickens into a proper downpour, soaking cloaks, turning the ground into soup. But the village won't be denied its spectacle. Someone strikes up a fiddle. Someone else beats on a pot. And suddenly, it's not a ceremony but a dance, bodies spinning, mud splashing, laughter rising through the storm. You're swept into it, spinning until the world blurs, until your feet ache, until you don't know if the warmth in your chest is joy or terror. At some point, your mother hugs you, too tightly, murmuring words you can't hear over the music. The well women nod with approval, already rewriting the story for future gossip. "Joined in the rain," they'll say. The sky itself wept with joy. You know they'll leave out the goat sneezing on the priest. By the time it's over, the fire is half drowned, the bread is gone, and everyone smells like wet wool and mead. You stand there, shivering, dripping, unsure if you should be elated or horrified. Around you, the villagers disperse, satisfied with their night's entertainment. Your maybe partner squeezes your hand, his palm warm despite the cold, and says, "Well, that's done." And just like that, it is not a wedding, not even really a choice, just a joining, recorded in memory, sealed by bread, ale, and a goat that looks more traumatized than anyone else. You don't know what comes next. You don't even know if this counts as happiness, but you know you're bound now. And in this village, bound is enough. The first night is the worst. You slide into bed thinking perhaps, just perhaps, you'll find rest after the chaos of your so-called joining. Instead, you discover that sleep in this new arrangement is more rumor than reality. There are bodies everywhere. Tiny ones, warm ones, limbs flung like catapults across the straw mattress. You claim a sliver of space along the edge, clutching the blanket like a drowning sailor clings to driftwood, while around you the bed heaves with sighs, snores, and the faint sound of teeth grinding. A foot connects with your ribs before you've even shut your eyes. You flinch, but no one else stirs. The child responsible rolls over, drools directly onto your shoulder, and resumes dreaming with the calm of the innocent. You stare into the dark, listening to the chorus. One baby whimpering, another coughing, someone grinding their jaw like they're trying to turn oats into flour with sheer determination. You wonder if the goat outside will let you borrow its stall. The second night is worse. Now that you know what to expect, you anticipate every kick, every squeal, every sudden midnight demand for milk. Your partner snores like thunder, oblivious, while you lie awake cataloging every sound in the room. A rustle, a sneeze, a toddler sitting bolt upright in the dark and announcing, "I saw a ghost." You don't even bother asking where. You just shove more blanket into your ears and pray for unconsciousness. It doesn't come. By the third night, you begin to understand why everyone in the village walks around looking slightly unhinged. It isn't the plagues, or the lack of bread, or the endless sermons about temptation. It's this: the constant symphony of small lungs shrieking at odd hours, the kicks that bruise your shins, the sticky fingers patting your face at dawn like you're a horse to be fed. You drag yourself to the well with circles under your eyes, and the well women smirk knowingly. "New family?" Wolfrida asks, her tone dripping with malice disguised as curiosity. You grunt in reply and nearly drop your bucket on her head. Your only solace is the goat. Every time a child wails, the goat outside answers, bleating like a companion in misery. You start whispering to it through the shutters, late at night, just to feel less alone. "What have I done?" you ask, and the goat bleats back, mournful, resigned. You imagine it saying, "You've made my life worse, too. We suffer together." Meals are no reprieve. One child demands your bread. Another steals the cheese straight from your hand. A third insists on sitting on your lap while you attempt to drink broth, which results in more broth on your lap than in your stomach. You can't even be angry, because their big eyes blink up at you with such pure expectation that you find yourself handing over your last crumb just to stop the crying. You're starving, but they're quiet, so you consider it victory. Days blur into nights, nights into days, until you're not sure you've actually slept at all. Your partner claims he doesn't hear a thing when the screaming starts, which makes you want to hit him with the ladle. You resist, mostly because the ladle is needed for soup, and the soup is the only thing keeping you upright. Instead, you mutter darkly under your breath, plotting revenge in the form of shoving a drooling toddler onto his chest The next time he dares close his eyes, the worst is the baby. Not because the baby is cruel, but because the baby is relentless. You begin to measure time in intervals between its cries. 10 minutes of peace, then a wail that rattles the rafters. You rock, you bounce, you sing off-key lullabies until your throat aches. Nothing helps. You envy people who died peacefully in their sleep. At least they got some. One morning, after a particularly brutal night, you stumble outside to fetch water. The world is foggy, damp, gray, and you feel like a corpse in search of a grave. The goat greets you with its usual bleat, and you mutter, "You and me both, friend." Wilfrida passes by, takes one look at your face, and cackles so hard she nearly drops her basket. "First month?" she asks. And before you can answer, she adds, "It gets worse." You consider drowning yourself in the well. And yet, amidst the exhaustion and resentment, something strange happens. There are moments, brief, fleeting, when the chaos feels almost bearable. A toddler curls into your side, warm and small, sighing in sleep. The baby grabs your finger with surprising strength, refusing to let go. Even the drool on your shoulder starts to feel less like punishment and more like proof that someone trusts you enough to collapse entirely in your arms. You don't admit it out loud, not even to the goat. But sometimes, when the noise dies down and the world is briefly quiet, you think, maybe this is what family is supposed to be. Not restful, not peaceful, but tangled limbs, spilled broth, and the certainty that you are part of something bigger than your own tired bones. Then someone kicks you in the face, and the spell breaks. You press your palm to the bruise, stare at the ceiling, and whisper again, "What have I done?" The goat answers. Always. It always starts the same way, with him sidling over when no one else is watching, carrying the grin of a man who thinks he's clever and the smell of someone who bathes once per equinox. He leans against the fence post, arms folded like he's settling in for a deep philosophical debate, when in fact, what he's preparing to do is make everyone uncomfortable. His opening line is always identical. You know, in some villages, you know what comes next. It's never about farming techniques or better ways to mend a roof. No, his some villages are always hypothetical utopias where everyone's sharing wives, husbands, goats, and probably the occasional turnip. Today is no different. He lowers his voice, as though the entire village doesn't already know what he's like, and says, "In some villages, a man can have 2 wives, sometimes 3. You nod, not looking up, focusing with great intensity on the lichen stuck to your shoes. Scraping it suddenly feels like the most important task in the world, an art form, a divine calling. Because if you look at him, if you give him even half an inch of attention, he'll launch into a monologue about natural order and sharing affection in a community sense, which sounds suspiciously like, "I want more women to tolerate me." In Waited Once, he mistakes your silence for interest. He always does. "It makes sense, doesn't it?" he presses. "More hands for work, more children for the fields, more warmth in the bed." He wiggles his eyebrows on that last part, which makes you want to throw your shoe at his head. Instead, you press harder at the lichen, imagining it's his face. Sometimes he brings up examples. They say in the mountains, there's a man with 4 wives and a cow he calls his mistress. You don't ask who they are. You know it's just him, inventing stories to give his ideas credibility. Once, he even claimed a priest from another parish said polygamy was holy if the intentions were pure. No one believed him, least of all the priest, who nearly choked on his bread when he heard. The worst part is how he leans in, like you're co-conspirators in some grand secret. His breath smells faintly of onions, his beard is always slightly damp, and you can feel the heat of his grin radiating off his face. "So," he whispers, "what do you think? Could work here, don't you reckon?" You don't reckon. You don't reckon at all, but saying that outright would only fuel him. Give him another reason to debate, to explain, to outline the logistics of communal bedding as though he's discovered a revolutionary farming technique. So you mumble something like, interesting, and then double down on pretending to scrape a particularly stubborn patch of lichen, even though it's been gone for several minutes. Other people avoid him too. You've seen it. He approaches the well women once, tried to bring up efficiency in households with multiple wives. Wilfrida smacked him with her bucket so hard he nearly fell in. Agnes muttered something about sin in bulk, and Maud just cackled until he slunk away, red-eared and muttering about close-minded villagers. But still, he persists. At feasts, at market, in the fields, he finds you, or anyone, and begins again. In some villages, he'll say, eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man who thinks he's stumbled on hidden wisdom, when really he's just lonely and bad at flirting. Once, you made the mistake of asking, "What about women with multiple husbands?" He blinked, stunned, like the thought had never occurred to him. Then he stammered something about "that's different," before quickly changing the subject back to his imaginary mountain man with 4 wives. You didn't press. You learned. The children call him Uncle Moore, though never to his face. They whisper it behind his back, giggling, then run when he turns around. You sometimes think he deserves the nickname, not because of the polygamy obsession, but because he always wants more of your time, more of your patience, more of your sanity. One evening, after he's cornered you yet again, you catch your partner watching from across the green. Their arms are folded, eyebrows raised, expression hovering somewhere between amusement and warning. You shrug helplessly, pointing at your shoe like, "Look, lichen." They shake their head and turn away, muttering something you can't hear, but suspect is uncharitable. The goat, as always, seems to know. It bleats loudly whenever he approaches, as if announcing, "Beware, nonsense incoming." You've started to think the goat is your truest ally in this matter. Eventually, you master the art of escape. When you hear his opening line, in some villages, you suddenly remember urgent chores. You must fetch water, even if your bucket is already full. You must check the firewood, even if it's midsummer. You must scrape lichen endlessly until your shoes shine with imaginary moss. Anything to avoid the inevitable lecture on how sharing wives is as natural as sharing bread. Still, he lingers, hovering at the edges of gatherings, waiting for a chance to bring it up again. You know one day he'll corner someone new, someone younger, someone too polite to walk away, and the cycle will begin again. For now, you keep your head down, your shoes very clean, and your responses non-committal. Because in this village, survival doesn't just mean enduring hunger, cold, and plagues. It means enduring that one weird cousin and his endless theories about some villages. And praying you never end up in one. Goat herding is not what the troubadours sing about. There are no sonnets written to celebrate mud-stained boots, or the smell that clings to you after a full day chasing stubborn creatures who look at you with eyes too human to forgive. But here you are, trudging beside your partner, staff in hand, trying to look authoritative, while a goat nibbles the edge of your tunic. It isn't romantic, not in the candlelit sense. There are no flowers, no lute songs, no fluttering silks. What there is, sore feet, blistered palms, and the constant chorus of bleats. Yet, somewhere between shoving goats off a ditch and rescuing one from trying to climb a fence with no exit strategy, you feel something close to tenderness. Not glamorous, not sweeping, just steady. You march together through fields damp with dew, swatting flies, muttering curses, and occasionally laughing when a goat decides to headbutt your leg. Your partner takes the blows in stride, grinning like he's been chosen for some sacred trial. You laugh at him, but when one goat decides you look like an enemy, he's already at your side, waving his staff, shielding you like you're royalty under siege. The gesture is ridiculous, but your chest warms anyway. Blisters bloom on your hands, raw from the rope and the rough wood. He notices before you do, catches your hand in his, turns it gently as though studying a rare artifact. "You'll toughen up," he says, thumb brushing lightly over the sore spot. It's a small thing, but the way he lingers, the way his eyes soften, makes the sting fade. You let him hold on longer than necessary, until a goat tugs at his sleeve and the spell is broken. At midday, you find shade under a crooked tree. He drops beside you, breathless, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. You share bread, torn unevenly, the crust sharp against your teeth. He gives you the bigger piece without comment, as though it's obvious you deserve it. You pretend not to notice, but you do. You always notice. It's then, in the lull, when the goats are too tired to rebel, that he leans closer. Not much, just enough for you to feel the brush of his shoulder against yours, warm even through the layers of wool. The world narrows, the bleeding fades. You tilt your head, almost without thinking, and his lips find yours. It's not smooth. It's not practiced. It tastes of bread and salt and exhaustion, but it's real. And for a moment, you forget the blisters, the mud, the relentless goats. It's just you and him, and the space between you closing like it was meant to. Then a goat sneezes, loud, violent, right behind your head. You jump. He laughs so hard he nearly falls over, clutching his stomach, tears streaming down his face. The goat snorts again, as though pleased with itself, and saunters off like a chaperone declaring the moment over. You glare at it, muttering threats of stew and leather, but your partner only laughs harder, until you find yourself laughing too, breathless and ridiculous in the shade of that crooked tree. The rest of the day, the goats test your patience as usual. They scatter in 3 directions, they climb where they shouldn't, they butt heads with each other like tiny, furry drunks. But somehow, you mind less. Each shared struggle, each exasperated look exchanged over the heads of these beasts, feels like its own secret language. When one goat slips through the hedge, you both chase it together, your hands brushing, your laughter mingling as you wrestle it back to the flock. It's chaos, but it's your chaos, and that makes it bearable. By dusk, your feet are screaming, your shoulders ache, your clothes stink of goat. You should feel miserable, but as you trudge home, side by side, he reaches for your hand again. Rough palms, blistered fingers, grime under the nails, and still the gesture makes your chest tighten. Not a courtly romance, not a ballad-worthy tale, but something truer, something that feels stitched into the marrow of your days. Later, lying in bed, you think about that kiss, the laughter, the goat's untimely sneeze. You think about the way his thumb brushed your blister like it mattered. You realize then that love, in this life, isn't candlelight or silken gowns. It's shared bread, muddy boots, and the small comfort of knowing someone else is just as tired, just as blistered, and just as willing to chase a runaway goat with you until the sun sets. And maybe that's better than any ballad. The years creep in without asking, like damp through the roof or mice in the grain bin. One day you wake up and realize your knees sound like the mill wheel. Your back is less forgiving than the priest's sermons, and the teeth you once used to tear bread with ferocity are now dropping out like poorly nailed shingles. You don't remember exactly when it started, only that now every laugh ends with a cough, and every embrace requires a careful negotiation of joints. The hay never stopped scratching. No matter how many winters pass, no matter how many times you curse it, the straw finds ways to jab you in the side, leave welts on your legs, creep into places no material should go. The door still swings loose on its hinge too, rattling whenever the wind pushes against it, as though mocking your lifelong inability to fix it properly. And yet, somehow, none of it bothers you as much as it used to, because now the two of you laugh more at the goats that never stop trying to climb into the stew pot, at the way the youngest child insists on announcing their bodily functions like proclamations of war, at the fact that your neighbor's rooster crows at midnight, drunk on its own importance. You laugh when the stew burns, when the ale runs out, even when your shoes fall apart mid-journey and you have to hobble home like penitents. The laughter softens everything. Wrinkles dig into your skin, but they dig along the lines of smiles. Sometimes, when no one's looking, you still pass each other turnips like it's a secret language. He'll slide one across the table, not a word spoken, and you'll grin because you remember what that meant once. An offering, a flirtation, a question you were too shy to voice. Now it's mostly a joke, but sometimes, in the quiet, it's not just a joke. Sometimes, it's still the question. And sometimes, it's still the answer. The bed is fuller than ever, with children, grandchildren, and the occasional stray goat sneaking in during storms. You don't get much sleep, but you've learned to find peace in the noise. You lie there, staring at the ceiling beams you've memorized knot by knot, and instead of whispering, "What have I done?" you think, "So, this is what it's all come to." And for the first time, you're not terrified. The well women have grown old too, though they still sit at the rim with the authority of queens. Their gossip has mellowed into storytelling, embroidered with exaggerations and half-remembered scandals. They nod at you now, no longer with smirks, but with recognition, as if to say, "You've survived what we survived. You've carried the weight we carried," and you nod back, feeling that survival itself is the greatest story of all. There are aches, always aches. Your partner massages your shoulders after long days, hands rough, touch clumsy but kind. You rub his back when he groans at dawn, each sound a reminder that time spares no one. The tenderness isn't graceful, it's practical. It's soup delivered to the bedside when fevers come. It's boots patched for the 20th time because he still insists on wearing them. It's sharing the last bite of bread without even asking. Sometimes, in the fields, you pause to watch him work. He's slower now, his hair more gray than dark, but he still moves with the stubbornness of someone unwilling to surrender to age. He catches you staring and raises an eyebrow, and you laugh, embarrassed, before he tosses you a turnip. The goats scatter, the children shout, but in that moment, it's just the two of you again, as if time never passed. Winter nights are the hardest. The cold gnaws deeper, your joints stiffer than the shutters. You huddle close, wrapped in layers of wool that never quite block the drafts, and whisper stories to each other until sleep takes you. Sometimes the stories are real. Memories of feasts, of births, of mistakes that turned into legends. Sometimes they're imagined, about lives you never lived, adventures you never took. But always, the stories end the same way, with both of you together, in whatever form life has left you. You think about the past sometimes, about the haylofts and the barn ladders, the stolen kisses and the poorly timed sneezes of goats. You think about the ceremonies shouted over rain, the babies who wouldn't sleep, the endless nights of exhaustion, and the endless days of work. It all blurs together into something that feels both chaotic and strangely perfect. And when you laugh now, when the children laugh, when the grandchildren join in, it feels like the whole village is still moving with you, still stumbling forward. One tooth, one turnip, one whispered joke at a time. The hay scratches, the door rattles, your knees ache. But none of it matters as much as the warmth of his hand in yours, calloused and familiar, the kind of touch that has weathered years and storms and still lingers with quiet certainty. You grin at him across the table, another turnip sliding between you, and for the first time in a long time, you don't just feel old, you feel eternal. You wake up to the sound of chickens screaming like unpaid heralds, announcing another dawn you didn't ask for. The fire has gone out, your feet are cold, and a child has somehow crawled sideways across your chest in the night, drooling into your hair. You peel them off gently, sit up, and stretch, joints popping like old doors. Beside you, your partner snores softly, face pressed into the same lumpy straw mattress you've shared for what feels like 100 years. It isn't glamorous. It never was. There's no bard writing a ballad about your mornings, no lute-strumming wanderer immortalizing the romance of scraping frost off a water bucket. But there's something steady here, something that lasts longer than roses or silk or metaphors about trembling swans. The person next to you is the same one who once winked at you over a pile of dirty socks by the river, the same one who carved awkward hearts into sticks and left them on your doorstep, the same one who thought a goat sneezing in the hayloft was the funniest thing in the world. You look at him now, older, hair more gray than not, teeth fewer than before, back bent from years of fields, and somehow you still grin, because he's still him. Still the same man who passes you turnips across the table with a mischievous smile. Still the same one who held your hand through every birth, every storm, every night when the baby wouldn't stop screaming. Still the one who snored through half the chaos but always woke up when you needed him most. Life isn't poetry here. It's bread. Hard, stale, often burned, sometimes rescued by dipping it into broth. Bread you eat together. Bread you tear in half without thinking. Bread that's sometimes the only thing keeping the children quiet long enough for you to remember what silence feels like. You chew it, grimace, and laugh, because even when it's bad, it's yours. The days blur, the chores repeat. The goats still try to climb fences. The door still doesn't latch properly. The hay still scratches. And yet, through all of it, you find warmth. In the way your children run across the green with laughter louder than bells. In the way your partner brushes mud off your face with his thumb, as though you're still worth the effort. In the way the entire village, with its gossip and its judgments, has somehow knitted itself around you, until even the well women nod when you pass, as if to say, you made it. There were moments when you doubted, when you sat awake at night, staring at the rafters, whispering, "What have I done?" to the dark. When the mead made you reckless, when the babies made you sleepless, when the midwife's wooden board carried your name like a weight. You thought then that it might all collapse, that you'd drown in the noise and the labor and the endless cycle of planting, birthing, and burying. But somehow, it didn't collapse. Somehow, it worked. Not perfectly, not without bruises or regrets, or a few too many arguments about goats eating laundry. But it held together, like a patched tunic, frayed at the edges but still wearable, like a roof that leaks in 3 places but keeps you dry enough, like bread that's never quite good but always fills you anyway. You stretch again, your back complaining, and glance at your partner as he stirs awake. His eyes open, squinting against the pale light creeping through the cracks in the shutters. He yawns, scratches his beard, and says something unintelligible about needing more firewood. You laugh, because you've heard that exact sentence every morning for decades, and you know full well he won't gather it until nightfall. The chickens are still screaming, the children are stirring. The day is already demanding more than you feel ready to give, but you lean over, press your lips briefly to his forehead, and feel him smile under the weight of years. There's no poetry here, no ballads, just warmth, noise, love, and bread. Always bread, and it is enough.